Imagine sending a message and knowing it might take months to arrive or never arrive at all. Imagine trusting your most important words, declarations of war, pleas for help, final goodbyes to a stranger on horseback or a ship sailing into the unknown, before phones, before emails, before even electricity. This is the forgotten story of how humanity stayed connected when distance ruled everything. For most of human history, communication was inseparable from movement. A message could only travel as fast as a person, an animal, or a ship could carry it. There were no signals bouncing invisibly through the air, no instant replies, only patience and risk. Early humans relied on the spoken word, carried by memory. But memory failed, stories changed, details were lost. The invention of writing changed everything, but it didn't make communication fast. It only made it permanent. From that moment on, civilizations began a long, brutal struggle against distance itself. In ancient civilizations, the earliest communication networks were built on human bodies. Runners carried messages between villages, cities, and rulers. In ancient Greece, trained couriers could run extraordinary distances, sometimes until death. The famous marathon runner Phidippides wasn't a myth. His dedication was a reality of ancient communication. Messages were memorized or carried on fragile materials like papyrus or clay tablets. If the messenger fell, the message died with them. To carry information was to carry responsibility and sometimes a death sentence. The domestication of animals transformed communication speed. The Persian Empire built one of the world's first organized courier systems using horses and relay stations. A message could travel hundreds of miles in just days, astonishing for its time. The Rumang Empire refined this system even further with its vast network of stone roads, strategically placed relay posts, and official state messengers. Rome's power depended not just on its legions, but on its information flow. To control the message was to control the empire. Messengers were attacked by bandits. Ships vanished in storms. Letters burned, sank, or were stolen. In wartime, they traveled through enemy territory, knowing capture could mean torture or execution. Yet they went anyway, because without them, command collapsed, armies marched blindly, and cities were left defenseless. Communication wasn't a convenience, it was survival. As societies stabilized, personal letters became the backbone of communication for the literate elite. But sending a letter was never a casual act. It was expensive, often dangerous, and far from private. Letters were frequently read aloud by scribes at both ends or intercepted by enemies. In medieval Europe, monasteries and royal courts controlled most written communication. The vast majority of people couldn't read or write. For them, a single letter could take weeks to cross land and months to cross oceans. And even then, there was no guarantee it would arrive. Ocean travel introduced a new kind of agonizing silence. When ships departed, they vanished into the horizon, sometimes forever. Families waited years for news that might never come. Wars were fought long after peace treaties had been signed, simply because the message hadn't arrived yet. Entire colonies operated independently for months or years at a time because communication lagged hopelessly behind reality. Distance didn't just delay information, it reshaped decisions. To combat this, humans desperately searched for faster ways to communicate without physical movement. They turned to signals. Smoke signals by day, fire beacons by night. The booming of drums, the call of horns, the waving of flags. These systems were fast. The printing press didn't speed up messages instantly across visible distances. News could spread across regions, came at a cost, shaping public opinion for the first time. They could say danger fueled revolutions, enemy approaching. Newspapers connected cities emotionally, but they couldn't say why, even if physically distant. How. Not communication became less personal. The message was immediate, powerful, but stripped. By the 19th century, the invention of the printing press in the 15th century didn't
The
speed
telegraph
up
allowed
individual
messages
messages
to travel
but it
faster than any
multiplied
human
them
or animal
exponentially
ever
could. For the first time, news could spread
distance
across entire regions, shaping public opinion on a massive scale. Pamphlets fueled revolutions. Newspapers connected cities emotionally, even if they were still physically distant. Communication became less personal, but far more powerful, laying the groundwork for shared national identities. By the 19th century, humanity finally broke free from the chains of physical transport. The invention of the telegraph was a revolution. For the first time in history, a message could travel faster than any human, horse, or ship ever could. Distance lost its power. Time collapsed. News from across the continent, or even across the ocean, could arrive in minutes, not months. But even then, communication was still coded, limited, and controlled by operators. The world was shrinking at a breathtaking pace, but the intimacy of the human voice had not yet conquered distance. One of the strangest effects of this long era of slow communication was that different parts of the world lived in different versions of reality at the same time. A war could end, but soldiers would still be fighting and dying months later. A king could die, but his orders would still be obeyed in faraway colonies. History wasn't synchronized. Each place existed in its own time bubble, defined by how fast messages could reach it. This delay didn't just slow history. It fractured it, shaping cultures to be more cautious, more local, and more independent. Beyond empires and wars, slow communication profoundly shaped personal lives. Love letters crossed borders and oceans, carrying longing, hope, and fear. Some arrived years after they were sent. Some never arrived at all. Parents waited for news of children who had moved away. Spouses waited for confirmation of a soldier's survival. Many people lived their entire lives without closure, suspended in a state of not knowing. In this world, silence didn't mean disinterest. It meant distance. And waiting became a permanent, aching part of human emotion. When communication finally became truly instant first with the telegraph, and then, life-alteringly, with the telephone, human psychology began to change. We became less patient, but more connected. Decisions accelerated. Expectations shifted. The world shrank into a global village. But in gaining this speed, something was lost. The weight of words, the gravity of silence, the understanding that every message was a fragile, precious thing. Before our instant world, communication demanded effort, and that effort created meaning. People planned their lives differently because they had to. Decisions were deliberate. Words were chosen with care. Silence was normal, not alarming. The slowness of communication created a world that moved at a human pace. Today, a message crosses the planet in seconds. A text, an email, a call. It's instant, effortless. But for most of human history, communication wasn't just slow. It was a gamble, a journey into uncertainty. Every letter sent carried hope. Every delay carried fear. Understanding how people once communicated reminds us of something modern life often forgets. Connection was never guaranteed. It was earned step by step, mile by mile. And every message that actually arrived was nothing short of a miracle. Before phones, communication was physically demanding, dangerous, and often deadly. Imagine being a messenger. You could be attacked by bandits on a lonely road. Your ship could vanish in a storm at sea. The letters you carried could be burned in a fire, sink to the bottom of the ocean, or be stolen by enemies. Some ancient empires even punished messengers who delivered bad news, executing them on the spot, even when the news was true. To carry information was to carry a huge responsibility, and sometimes it was a death sentence. In wartime, this was even more extreme. Messengers had to travel through enemy territory, knowing that capture could mean torture or execution. Yet they went anyway. Why? Because without them, command would collapse. Armies would march blindly into ambushes. Cities would be left defenseless, unaware an attack was coming. Leaders would be ruling in darkness, making decisions based on old, outdated information. Communication wasn't a convenience. It was the absolute key to survival. One of the strangest effects of this slow communication was that different parts of the world lived in different versions of reality at the same time. Think about it. A war could officially end, but soldiers on a distant battlefield would keep fighting and dying for months because the news simply hadn't reached them. A king could die, but his orders would still be obeyed across oceans by people who had no idea their ruler was gone. Colonies often acted independently, not because they wanted to rebel, but because they just didn't know what had changed back home. History wasn't synchronized. Each place existed in its own time bubble, shaped entirely by how fast messages could reach it. This delay didn't just slow history down. It fractured it, creating countless different timelines all running at once. Beyond empires and wars, this reality shaped personal lives in profound ways. Love letters crossed borders and oceans, carrying longing, fear, and hope. Some arrived years after they were sent. Many never arrived at all. Parents waited for news of children who had moved away. Spouses waited for confirmation that their loved ones had survived a battle or a long sea voyage. So many people lived their entire lives without closure, never knowing what happened to the people they cared about. In this world, silence didn't mean someone was ignoring you. It simply meant distance, and waiting wasn't an annoyance. It became a permanent part of the human emotional landscape. When communication finally became fast, first with the telegraph and then the telephone, it was a revolution. And it didn't just change technology. It changed human psychology. People became less patient, but also more connected. Decisions accelerated. The world shrank. But in this rush for speed, something was lost. We lost the weight of words, the gravity of silence, a deep understanding that messages were precious and fragile things. Before our instant world, communication demanded effort, and that effort created meaning. Today, messages are instant, endless, and often disposable. We send thousands without a second thought. But it's worth remembering that once, every single message was a journey. Every word had to survive distance, weather, war, and time. People lived knowing that connection was uncertain and that the physical presence of another person was truly precious. Understanding how messages once traveled helps us understand how humans once lived, slower, more patient, more deliberate. In a world where silence is now seen as uncomfortable, it's worth remembering that silence was once normal, and every message that broke it had the power to change a life forever. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing for more stories about how our world came to be.